When I announced that we were going to be studying Elijah and Elisha, I knew approximately how much material there was in 2 Kings on those guys, but I didn't know how many lessons it would take to cover them. And lo and behold, we have a minor miracle in which we're going to finish with Elisha this evening so that we can start something new in the spring. I should mention that, we are in a drawing every year for use of the room. For the spring semester, we have A, B, and C 9 out of the 10 Wednesdays that we requested, and we've had to take a Tuesday for the other one. And that happens to be the first one of the semester. So, I will let you know. And then in the fall, I think we have 2 Tuesdays, if I'm not mistaken. Paula is going to look up on her handy-dandy calendar when that Tuesday is.
It's February.
Yes.
10th.
February 10th.
We start again.
February 10th. That's a Tuesday, and then every week after that, we are scheduled to have this room on Wednesday. And again, I would say, I'm just so grateful that they allow us to have this room. They come in, they set it up, they come in and they take it down, and all we have to do is show up, and it's very nice of them to do that for us. Some of the material we're going to look at tonight is, well, maybe other nights it's been a little confusing too, but it's kind of confusing. One of the things is that it's possible that some of the events that we're going to look at tonight are not in chronological order. Now, to the Western mind, that's just crazy. You're supposed to put things in chronological order. But, unfortunately, God did not use Western minds to create his scripture. So, he went with what he had. And I'll mention it a couple of times, but I'm not sure everything is in chronological order. Did any of you notice something that you thought maybe was out of order when you were reading? See, none of you have raised your hand, and only 4 of you read the passages, right? But that's okay, because I'm going to read quite a bit of it tonight anyway. But I wanted you to notice that ahead of time, because I will mention it specifically. Elisha has been very busy performing miracles. Everything from making an axe head float to saving a city from certain destruction. He was using the power of God that was invested in him after his mentor Elijah had gone back to heaven. But as you can see in these chapters, if you read any of them, that his ministry is winding down. He's doing less, and it's probably because he's getting older. And you know how old people tend to slow down when they age. Some of you don't know very much about that, but no names to be mentioned. So we're going to begin in 2 Kings 8, where the prophet has more dealings with the Shunammite woman. Do you remember the woman from Shunem? The Shunammite woman, she was the one that created the Airbnb for Elisha. Remember? We'll build a little room for him upstairs. We'll have a bed and a desk and a lamp, And anytime he comes, we'll let him stay there, and we'll probably even feed him too. That's why it's an Airbnb. So Elisha apparently finds out that there's going to be a bad famine, and he still has a place in his heart for this Shunammite woman, and he goes and he warns her that this is coming and you need to get out of Dodge. And like others before her, she fled to Philistia, home of Goliath and other bad people. But apparently it was a good place. It was right along the Mediterranean coast. It didn't suffer very much from famines very often. She went there and stayed there for 7 years. When the famine was over, she came back, and her land and house were occupied by somebody else. There's no details given. But she immediately begins to think, how in the world can I get my land and my house back? And she goes to see the king to see if that can happen. And guess who the king is talking to? Did anybody read this? Gehazi. What? What? The last time we saw Gehazi was when Elisha told him, you're going to have leprosy from now on. So either this story is out of order with other ones, or maybe he is such a good hand, and maybe his leprosy is not a danger, or not. I don't know, because normally lepers were banned from regular society, and the fact that he could be this close to the king as a leper doesn't make sense to me. So it could be, his name Gehazi could be like Bob, where there's a lot of Bobs and maybe a lot of Gehazis back then. I don't know. But the way his name is introduced, it's like we're supposed to understand who Gehazi is because we're familiar with it. And it just so happened when this woman comes in, it's at that point where Gehazi is talking to the king and telling all of the wonderful things that Elisha has done during his life. Which you wonder if he would do that if he's already been stricken with leprosy too. But he was telling him, and right then the woman comes in, and Gehazi goes, oh, speaking of wonderful things that he did, this woman, not only, she had her son restored to him. And that's when the woman says, I need my land and house back. And the king, moved by the things that Gehazi had said, Harry, probably wasn't Harry, I need you to see to this. Make sure that this woman gets her house and her land back, and all of the profit that it gained while she was gone. How about that? And it was taken care of. You see, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And she knew Gehazi, and Gehazi knew the king, and it all fit together. So she goes away for 7 years, and when she comes back, her land is given to her. Then in the next episode, we find Elisha visiting Damascus in Syria. Do you have a sense of how far Damascus is from Samaria? We don't have our handy-dandy map here. But if we did, Samaria would be here and Damascus would be here. It's over 100 miles from Samaria to Damascus. And Elisha said, you know what, I think I'll just wander up to Damascus for a while. In fact, it's kind of interesting the way it's worded. Just a minute. In verse 7 of chapter 8, the king who he was going to visit was told, the man of God has come all the way up here. So he knows he's come a long way. And I'm not sure exactly why he went to Damascus on this occasion, but I do know that when he got there, the king was sick. He had some kind of problem. His name was Ben-Hadad. Maybe he was suffering from Ben-Hadadness, with a name like that, it could be a disease. And he worried about whether or not he would recover. And he thought, if anybody would know that, Elisha would. So he sends one of his, I hate to use this phrase, but I will, trusted generals to go inquire of Elisha as to whether or not he will recover. So Elisha is found by, who was that general's name? Does anybody know? You get a name for the day if you know who it is. Hazael, yes.
Hazael?
Yes. And Elisha tells him, you can tell the king that he will recover from this illness. Yeah. However, he'll die soon after. That's called good news, bad news. Yeah, you'll get over this, but don't buy any bananas, Bill. You won't get a chance to eat them. So Hazael is thinking about that and how he's going to tell the king. And while that's happening, it says that Elisha was staring at Hazael, and he began to cry. And Hazael said, you know, what's the problem? And he says, verse 12 of chapter 8, because I know the harm you will do to the Israelites. You will set fire to their fortified places, kill their young men with the sword, dash their little children to the ground, and rip open their pregnant women. Yuck. And when, you know, sometimes if you think, gee, I wish I could have a vision from God about the future. Are you sure? This is not one that I would want. And apparently Elisha sees it in great detail, in technicolor. He can see the horrible things that Hazael is going to bring about in Israel. And it's so real to him that tears begin to run down his face. And when he tells Hazael what he's crying about, Hazael just says, well, I can't do that kind of damage. He even refers himself as a mere dog. I'm just a mere dog. How am I going to do that kind of damage to Israel? And Elisha said, well, the Lord has shown me that you are going to become king of Aram. If you're wondering how you're going to do the damage, you're going to do it because you're going to have all the power of the Syrian army to do it with. And I'm sure Hazael is thinking, wow, I didn't see that coming. Tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. Back in the days of Elijah, when Elijah went to the cave and heard God in the still small voice, after that, God gave him tasks to perform. Anybody remember those? One of them was to anoint, go for it, Hazael as king of Syria, and Jehu, king of Israel. Now that was back there. That was back in the days of Elijah. I don't know how much time has passed, but it's considerable. But that has already been done. And it was done by Elijah. Now, I don't know that Elisha even knows about that. And I'm wondering if Hazael has been thinking, well, that weird Elijah, he didn't know what he was talking about. But maybe when Elisha says, the Lord has allowed me to see that you're going to be the king of Syria, that all comes back to him. Yeah, I remember now. That other prophet guy told me that he even anointed me to be king. And I've just been waiting here. So, this is not funny. Hazael goes back to Ben-Hadad, and Ben-Hadad, of course, has just been waiting breathlessly to get the results. What did he say? What did he say? Well, he says you're going to get well. Yes! I just felt it in my bones. And then Hazael thinks about becoming king. And he takes a thick cloth and wets it and puts it over the face of the king and smothers him to death. Elisha said, yeah, you'll get over being sick, but he didn't tell him how he was going to die, but we find out that Hazael just could not wait to be king. If it's destined for me to be king, that other prophet anointed me, and now this guy says I'm going to be king. Why would we wait? I'm going to be king right now. And the only way to do that is to get rid of the old king. And sure enough, right after that happens, he is acclaimed as king. In chapter 9, Elisha now is instrumental in finding a new king for Israel. And his name is going to be Jehu. And again, remember that years before, Elijah was given the task of anointing Jehu to be king of Israel. But that has just been sitting there. Nobody's taken any action on that, and I get the impression that Jehu may have given up on that. Now, the job of finding the new king is a job that he delegates to one of his guys, one of the prophets, one of the sons of the prophets. Let's read together in chapter 9. The prophet Elisha summoned a man from the company of the prophets and said to him, "Tuck your cloak into your belt." You know what that means. Hurry. Do this quickly. Take this flask of oil with you and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you get there, look for Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. You got to know that his granddad was Nimshi, right? Okay. It's important. Go to him, get him away from his companions, and take him into an inner room. Then take the flask and pour the oil on his head and declare, "This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel." Then open the door and run. Don't delay. So, the young man, the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead, and when he arrived, he found the army officers sitting together. "I got a message for you, commander," he said. "Well, which one of us?" asked Jehu. "For you, commander," he replied. So Jehu got up and went into the house. Then the prophet poured the oil on Jehu's head and declared, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anoint you king over the Lord's people, Israel." And here's the task he's given. This is very important. "You are to destroy the house of Ahab, your master. And I will avenge the blood of my servants the prophets and the blood of all of the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish. I will cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. He was the first king of Israel, and his line ended. That's what we're going to do to Ahab's line, and you're going to be the one to do it. And like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah," two of my favorite people that I don't know anything about. "As for Jezebel, dogs will devour her on the plot of ground at Jezreel, and no one will bury her." And then he opened the door and ran. Come on, that would look funny in a movie. But what would make it funnier if he said all of that first and then dumped oil on his head and then ran? Because you'd think he was running because he dumped oil on his head. But no, he sees this as an anointing and he accepts it as an anointing. So Jehu goes out to his fellow officers who are obviously curious. What was that all about? Why did he need to speak to you? Specifically, they ask, what did that madman want? And Jehu says something like, these people, the way they talk. Just crazy stuff. No. We want to know. What did he say? He said, "I'm going to be king." And at that word, the other soldiers, the other commanders, all take off their robes and spread them in front of Jehu and acclaim him to be king. Well, there's still another king, you understand. But for them, it's a done deal. Jehu is going to be king. So, Jehu decides, if I'm going to be king, guess who I've got to get rid of? Joram or Jehoram. And he headed to Jezreel to kill the king. And the strange story begins in verse 17 of chapter 9. I hope some of you read this, because try to envision this. This city is sitting up, and there are high walls, and there are guys who stand on the wall and watch. And all of a sudden there's a cloud of dust. Here comes a big band of troops. Who is it? What are they doing? The king hears about them coming, and so he sends somebody, a soldier. He sends a horseman, is what he is called in the text. He sends a horseman out to see why these people are coming. The horseman arrives and says to Jehu, "Do you come in peace?" And his answer, I think it's a Hebrew idiom, but I think the closest thing to translate for me is, "Does this look like peace to you? I'm coming here with an army. Does it look like peace? Get in behind me." Guy says, "Okay." So he joins them. And here they come again. And the king wants to know what happened. He didn't come back. Oh, well, let's send another guy out. Brilliant. They send another guy up with the same question. "Do you come in peace?" The same answer. "Does this look like peace to you? Get in behind." And he also joins the troop, and they keep riding. And at that point, the king decides, oh, by the way, I didn't mention to you that the reason why he's in Jezreel is because he's recovering from an injury that he got in a battle with the Syrians. Anyway, and the king of Judah has come up to visit him, maybe to, wish him well or hope you get better soon or whatever. But they both go riding out. Now, if those other two guys didn't come back, is this the best idea? I would say no. And they ask the same dumb question, "Do you come in peace?" And this time the answer is a little different. "I'll show you peace." Jehu, a soldier, he was built for this, takes his bow and arrow and shoots Joram and kills him. And then turns on Ahaziah. Is it Ahaziah? Just a minute. There's too many names. I told you I'm dizzy, and I was afraid this was going to...
It's Ahaziah.
Ahaziah, good. And he shoots him as well. And he kills them both. He is on a mission. And everything that we see Jehu doing seems to be part of that mission. And the mission was to get rid of all of Ahab's line. Anything that had to do with Ahab, or people who knew Ahab, or people who had heard of Ahab, they're all going to have to go. And he is intent on doing that. So, after he has shot both of the kings, he continues on to Jezreel. He comes to the city, and that's when he meets good old Jezebel. We haven't heard about Jezebel in a long time. And I don't know this, but I would suggest to you that she's probably a little older now. Maybe lost some of her beauty of youth, shall we say? But then Jehu went to Jezreel, verse 30 of chapter 9. When Jezebel heard about it, she painted her eyes. You're in good stead, Paula. Arranged her hair and looked out a window. And as Jehu entered the gate, she asked, "Have you come in peace?" Wow, he gets asked that a lot. But she adds something. "Zimri, you murderer of your master." Whoa, she's getting in a shot. Now, this is interesting. He looked up at the window and called out, "Who is on my side? Who?" 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him like, "We could be on your side." And sensing that, he says, "Throw her down." So she's been looking out this window, and 2 guys grab a hold of her and pitch her out. So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered the wall, and the horses, as they trampled her, underfoot. Well, if the fall didn't kill her, the horses trampling her did. Enough blood to get on the wall and to get on the horses as well. And that's when Jehu went in, it says, and he ate and drank. He's taken a break. He's not done by any stretch of the imagination, but he's taking a break. Take care of that cursed woman, he said, and bury her, for she was a king's daughter. Okay, we're going to give her a funeral at least. Because after all, she was a king's daughter. From where now was she from?
Syria. No.
Nope. Close, but no cigar. What's that one up on the coast with Tyre and Sidon? I'm sorry.
Nineveh?
No, it's a country. The reason I am delaying here is because I am having a brain issue. Phoenicia. Did somebody say that? Yeah. Phoenicia. Thank you. Thank you, brain. Phoenicia. And she was sent down as kind of a, we're going to join these two nations by putting this man and this woman together, and she has just been awful from the day she arrived. And now, at least she's a king's daughter, we're going to give her a funeral. But when they went out to bury her, they found nothing except her skull, her feet, and her hands. They went back and told Jehu, who said, "This is the word of the Lord that he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite." It goes all the way back to when Elisha made a pronouncement about her. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. On the land that she stole, remember the vineyard that belonged to Naboth? Yeah. That's where she's going to die. So Jezebel's body will be like refuse on the ground in the plot at Jezreel, so that no one will be able to say, "This is Jezebel." In other words, there's not going to be a marker. There's not going to be one particular place where anybody can say, this is where... No. The dogs ate her. And especially, for people in those days, your body being desecrated was probably worse even than it is today. Because, anyway, we don't have time to go in any of that. Now, what can we say about Jehu? It's kind of a mixed bag for Jehu. He is given a mission to accomplish, and he approaches that mission with zeal and enthusiasm, maybe more than he needed. But Jehu saw himself as a minister of God's justice, and he carried out many executions. He even found someone who was of a like mind, a fellow named Jehonadab. One of my favorite little sections. It's verse 15. After he left there, he came upon Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, who was on his way to meet him. Jehu greeted him and said, "Are you in accord with me as I am with you?" "I am," Jehonadab answered. "If so," said Jehu, "give me your hand." So he did. And Jehu helped him up into the chariot. Jehu said, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." And then he had him ride along with him in his chariot. Then Jehu came to Samaria. He's been at Jezreel. Now he comes to Samaria. He has Jehonadab with him, and he killed all who were left of Ahab's family. He destroyed them according to the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. Elijah prophesied that this whole mess of Ahab's family is going to be wiped out. We don't know how it's going to happen until now. Jehu does it. Now, you don't need to know this to go to heaven, but I want you to act interested. I'm going to share something with you that it's not in your notes, but I'll tell you that it's coming from Jeremiah chapter 35. And I do find this interesting. I'm going to read it to you. I'm not even turning to Jeremiah. I printed it here in my notes. Remember now, Jehonadab, in verse 15 beginning, he is the son of Rechab. Got this? Jehonadab, the son of Rechab. Now, Jeremiah records a time that is somewhere around 150 to 200 years after this. Okay? 150 to 200 years after this happens, recorded in Jeremiah. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord during the reign of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, the king of Judah. Go to the Rechabite family, Rechab, the father of Jehonadab. Go to the Rechabite family and invite them to come to one of the side rooms of the house of the Lord and give them wine to drink. I'm skipping a couple of verses. Then I, Jeremiah, set bowls full of wine and some cups before the Rechabites and said to them, drink some wine. But they replied, we do not drink wine, because our forefather Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, gave us this command: neither you nor your descendants must ever drink wine. Also, you must never build houses, sow seed, or plant vineyards. You must never have any of these things, but must always live in tents. Then, notice now, then you will live a long time in the land where you are nomads. No drinking wine, no building houses, no planting vineyards or anything like that. You're just going to roam around. This is 150 years or 200 years after. They said, we're not drinking wine because Jehonadab told us not to. What kind of influence is that? I tell my boys not to do something and they'll line up to do it. You know. And then they said, we have obeyed everything our forefathers, Jehonadab the son of Rechab, commanded us. Neither we nor our wives, if I'd have been a Rechabite, Paul would never have married me, because the wives aren't allowed to drink wine either. Nor our sons and daughters have ever drunk wine. 150 years! Or built houses to live in, or had vineyards, fields, or crops. We have lived in tents and have fully obeyed everything our forefather Jehonadab commanded us. And all I can say to that is, oh, wow. But when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, invaded this land, we said, come, we must go to Jerusalem to escape the Babylonian and the Aramean armies. So we have remained in Jerusalem. Normally, we'd be out in a tent somewhere. The only reason we're here is because the Babylonian army is coming and we're looking for a safe place. And there's an application. It's in Jeremiah. Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Go and tell the people of Judah and those living in Jerusalem, will you not learn a lesson and obey my words, declares the Lord? Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, ordered his descendants not to drink wine, and this command has been kept. To this day they do not drink wine, and it's been a long time, because they obey their forefathers' command. But I have spoken to you again and again, yet you have not obeyed me. Again and again I sent all my servants the prophets to you. They said, each of you must turn from your wicked ways and reform your actions. Do not follow other gods and serve them. Then you will live in the land I have given to you and your ancestors. Same promise that Jehonadab made to his, remember? But you've not paid attention or listened to me. The descendants of Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, have carried out the command their forefather gave them, but these people have not obeyed me. Wow. And one of the things I thought was, and you may not think of it this way, but Jehonadab had a profound effect on his family for generations. Generation after generation. Why don't we drink wine, Dad? Because Jehonadab told us not to. Who? Well, that's your great-great-grandfather. And we're still not doing it. And God says, isn't it amazing that this group of people, it's probably a large group by now, the descendants, they all listened to what Jehonadab said, but you won't listen to me. It's disgusting. That's in the Hebrew. By comparison, it's just awful. I've sent prophets time and time again and told you what you needed to do in order to live in the land, and you said, we ain't doing that. So, that's the extra, and you did fairly well on looking interested. I appreciate that. I really do. It's from Jeremiah 35, if you want to find it later. Now, Jehu eventually made it to Samaria, the capital of Israel. What he found there were 70 princes from Ahab's line. They were all put to death. He found 42 relatives of Ahaziah. That's the king that he killed, that was the Judean king. He found 42 relatives of Ahaziah, and they were also killed. But why? Why Ahaziah? He is of the lineage of Ahab. I don't know if you remembered that his father married Jezebel's daughter or something like that. So he is of the line of Ahab, and so he is also killed. And then, and I don't know about this. I don't know about this. Jehu says to the prophets of Baal, you think Ahab was a worshiper of Baal? I'm a bigger worshiper of Baal. We're going to have a big feast for all the prophets of Baal. Y'all come. And they did. And he killed them all. Wow. Wiping up the princes of Ahab, the relatives of Ahaziah, and every single prophet that he can get. I mean, talk about under false pretenses. And the closing words are interesting in chapter 10, verses 26 and 27. I hope I can find this. Yay! They brought the sacred stone out of the temple of Baal and burned it. They demolished the sacred stone of Baal and tore down the temple of Baal, and people have used it for a latrine. I'm dizzy, people. Give me a... They have used it as a latrine to this day. I think I'll go down and pee on Baal while I'm there. You know? It's just a way that they can show their disdain, and they take advantage of it. And, Paula, when you read the words to this day, that means...
It's a long time.
It's been a long time. Thank you, Paula. You're 1 for 2 on that, but that's good. That's 50%. Keep you in the major leagues. They still use it as, I haven't been drinking, I promise. They still use it as a latrine to this very day. That's interesting. So, It says, beginning in verse 28, got to read this together. So Jehu destroyed Baal worship in Israel. However, huge word. However, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. And by the way, that was the first king of Israel who led the people down the garden path when they separated from Judah. He was the one who said, there's no point in going to Jerusalem anymore. We're not having those pilgrimages. We got plenty up here that you can worship. And so anytime someone is described as a bad king, he is compared to Jeroboam, who started the whole thing. He didn't depart from the sins of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit, and that specifically was the worship of the golden calves at Bethel and Dan. And the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in accomplishing what is right in my eyes, in other words, you've carried out this mission that I gave you, and have done to the house of Ahab all that I had in mind to do, your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. You'd hate to be in the 5th generation spot. To the 4th generation, you are going to be in the ruling place. Verse 31, yet Jehu was not careful to keep the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit. I think I've known people who, there was a part of their religion that they were very zealous for, and part that they went, And that's kind of the impression I get about Jehu. And I thought a lot about Jehu and why he is described like this. Yeah, you did good in fulfilling your mission, but there's a lot that you could have and should have done better. And I think up in verse 16, we see maybe one of the reasons that Jehu is like that. It's when he is meeting Jehonadab for the first time. He says in verse 16, now listen to these words, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. Now, that doesn't look that bad. But what if your preacher said, I want you to come to church Sunday and see how good I can preach the kingdom? Which would seem more important to him, the kingdom or looking good to the ones he was inviting? And I think that's probably true of Jehu. He was more proud of his zeal than he was in love with God. And so he gets mixed reviews. He gets told, yeah, you carried it out all right. And after all, I'm the one who said Ahab's family is just going to have to be cut off. And you've done a great job with that. But somehow your heart's not in it. His heart is mentioned specifically, was not right. It was not attuned to the ways and the laws of God. It was more in tune to, look how good I look. Because you know what? They're still talking about Jehu in Samaria. You know what he did? He killed all these, and then he killed all the prophets. He even fooled them. He acted like he was a big supporter of Baal, and then he turned them and killed them all. What a guy. And I think Jehu liked what a guy. And that was the problem with Jehu. So, a mixed bag, but in the end, not good enough. It wasn't enough about God. It was more about, too much about him. Okay, see what time it is. Oh, we're doing good. So we're going to skip. Now, I'm not going to talk about all this stuff in 11 and 12 because it's really got nothing to do specifically with Elisha. And this stuff did have a little to do with Elisha. When we get to verse 14, we find out that Elisha is suffering from illness. But before we get there, let's kind of set the context. Jehoahaz became Israel's king, and like his predecessors, he's described as one who did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Do you remember how many good kings there were in Israel? None. You're so good at this. Not one. Not one good king, and Jehoahaz filled that role perfectly. As a result of their disobedience to the laws of God, they lived under the cruelty of Syria, both Hazael and Ben-Hadad. Now, Jehoahaz, in a moment where he thought, we're all going to die, he actually went to the Lord and pleaded for God's mercy, and it was granted to him and to the nation. God showed mercy on him, and he showed mercy on the nation. And it comes in a rather, I'm not sure I understand why they put it this way. Notice in verse 5. The Lord provided a deliverer for Israel, and they escaped from the power of Aram. So the Israelites lived in their own homes as they had before. Who saved Israel? Yeah, but who did he do it through? How dare they not tell us? How come David gets so much press for everything he did? And so many others who delivered Israel get their name mentioned and lauded. This guy is unknown. Not to God, but to us. He raised up a deliverer he's not even identified, and as a result of his efforts, don't know how it happened, Israel was saved. And this is a phrase that lets you know that life is as usual again. The Israelites got to live in their homes as they had before. Well, isn't that great that God would do that for them? But they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam. He's the guy that gets the blame again. Which he had caused Israel to commit, they continued in them. Also, the Asherah pole remained standing in Samaria. Wow. God has mercy. He saves the city. The Israelites get to live at home. And they say, thank you, Asherah pole. It's awfully sad. So, Jehoash, his son, that's Jehoaz. Why did they have to name them so close to each other? Elijah, Elisha, Jehoaz, Jehosha. Anyway, Jehoash, he becomes king of Israel, and guess what? He's evil. Because he's a northern king, and they're all evil. He becomes king then, and it's in his days that Elisha gets sick, and it's pretty obvious that his days are numbered. Verse 14. Elisha was suffering from the illness from which he died. In other words, he's not going to get better and die from something else like Ben-Hadad. Remember? Ben-Hadad, you'll get well, but then you'll die from something else. Little did you know it was Hazael going to kill you. So he's going to die from the illness that he now has. And Jehoash, the king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. Now, for all the tension between the prophet of God and the royalty, there was still an awareness in the royalty of the specialness of these men. They were prophets of God. He says, my father, the chariots and the horsemen of Israel. What? What does that mean? Well, I'm going to tell you. First of all, does that have a familiar ring? Have you not read this before in our study? Anybody remember? Right when Elijah was being taken up in the whirlwind into heaven, Elisha said, my father, the horses and the chariots of Israel. And I think that is a way of saying that they understand that the gentleman to whom those words are being said are representative of the Lord of hosts, who is the real power in the armies that Israel assembles. Are you with me on that? Even the king of Israel realized that in Elisha, who speaks for God, that's where the real power of the horses and the chariots of Israel is. And it reminded me of something that David said in the Psalm 20 and verse 7. You might be familiar with this. Some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. That's what David said. But this is a long time after. But every once in a while, someone catches a glimpse that, boy, if God's not involved, we're in deep trouble. And then he gives Jehoash final instructions, preparing him for victory over Aram or Syria. I'm not going to read this. I have it in my notes to read. We don't have time. He says, I want you to go get your bow and arrow. And he pulls back the bow, and Elisha puts his hand on his hand, and he says, shoot, and he shoots it out the window. And he says, just like that arrow went out the window, you are going to have victory over Aram. Great. And then he says, and I don't understand this, maybe Paula will, take some arrows and beat them on the ground. And so he beats them on the ground 3 times. Did you read this? He beats him on the ground 3 times, and Elisha says, oh, that's so disappointing. You only beat it 3 times? Why not 5 or 6? And probably the king could have said, well, I'm old and I was tired. I don't know. Is he suggesting that there's a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of zeal, a lack of faith? I don't know. Whatever it is, he said, okay, yes, you're going to have victory over Aram, but it's going to be limited. You will win 3 battles against Aram, but after that, sorry, you're going to lose. You should have beat it. So, if you ever feel like God's telling you to beat something on the ground, do it until you wore out. Otherwise, it might be considered a lack of zeal or a lack of faith or something else. Then Elisha died and was buried. It's such a common ending to such an uncommon life. And I can't help but wonder, and I know I'm speculating here, but I've been known to do that before, you know that. I wonder if Elisha had anticipated more than that. I mean, the last prophet had seen a chariot of fire come and then a whirlwind carry him up to heaven. And Elisha laid in the bed and died. And that's just a reminder that all of God's heroes of faith died different ways. If you read in chapter 11 of Hebrews, the great faith chapter, some of them got eaten by lions and some of them died in a good old ripe age. And I don't know what the difference, well, that's not mine, you know. So Elijah goes up in a whirlwind, Elisha dies in the bed, and he's buried. But his ministry wasn't quite over if you read to the end of the chapter. There's a little footnote on Elisha's life. There's some Hebrew men out one day and they're burying one of their friends. They're holding a funeral for one of their friends. And on the horizon they see a Moabite army coming. And they panic. But instead of just leaving their dead friend there, they throw him into the crypt, the cave, the tomb, whatever, of Elisha. And when that guy lays on the bones, he comes back to life. So if you can find Elisha's bones when I die, I would appreciate it. That's weird, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And it has led to a doctrine in some faiths that if we can just find some kind of holy bones, they'll do great things that other things can't do. I don't know that that's what that story is meant to tell us. I think it is just meant to put a cap on the wonderful power that Elisha had. Even when he was dead, he gave life. But God did, right? God gave life. And my imagination, I can see this guy coming back and going, gee, I wonder who they were going to bury here. You, Harry, but can't do it now. Oh, and by the way, that's a Moabite raiding party. They may have had to do another funeral yet, depending on how they treated it. Okay, that's all there is about that. Elijah and Elisha, exactly 10 episodes.